If you are a Canadian couple between 55 and 64, and your net worth sits around $873,000, you are already in the top 10% of your age group. That sounds like the finish line. It sounds like you can stop worrying and start planning the retirement you pictured. Here is the math that does not add up. Say $400,000 of that net worth is your house, paid off or close to it, and the rest sits in an RRSP. Run the numbers on what that actually pays you every month, and the top 10% lifestyle can shrink down to about $2,000 a month in spendable cash. That is barely enough to cover a mortgage payment on a smaller place, let alone the retirement you pictured a year ago. Most people chasing being rich in Canada are chasing the wrong number. Net worth looks impressive on a statement, but a statement does not pay the hydro bill or a pharmacy copay. The distance between what your net worth looks like and what your bank account can actually spend each month, call it the liquidity gap, and it is the specific reason retirees who look wealthy on paper still feel stretched thin. Before we get to the $1,500,000 it takes to reach the top 5%, we need to fix how you are measuring rich. Otherwise, you end up house rich and cash poor right when you finally have the time to travel. If you are in that 55 to 65 window and you want your net worth to actually translate into a lifestyle, not just a number on a statement, stick around. This channel tracks freedom, not just wealth. To land in the top 10% of all Canadian households by net worth in 2026, you need roughly $2 million. That is the national number across every age group and every mortgage-free grandparent. For our 55 to 64 group specifically, the median net worth is $873,000, less than half of that national threshold. That means plenty of people in your age bracket who feel behind are actually doing fine, and plenty who feel ahead are closer to the middle than they think. I have watched people hit that median for their age group and relax completely, as if $873,000 means the hard part is over. It is not a bad instinct to have. It is just an incomplete one. Here is the full ladder for 2026. The top 10% nationally sits around $2 million. The top 5% climbs to about $2,600,000. The top 1%, the number that gets thrown around at dinner parties, sits around $7,900,000. Numbers like that can make anyone feel small, so it is worth slowing down and looking at where the gap actually comes from. Close to half of household wealth in Canada, about 48%, is tied up in non-financial assets, and for most families that mostly means the house. Statistics Canada has tracked this closely, and for the 55 to 64 group, the split between homeowners and renters is stark. Homeowners in that age bracket sit at a median net worth of $1,400,000. Renters sit at $11,900. That gap is not really about income. It is about which side of the housing market someone landed on decades ago. This did not happen by accident. Home prices in most major Canadian cities have climbed for decades, often faster than wages, which quietly turned the family home into the single largest asset most 55 to 64-year-olds own, without anyone deciding that on purpose. But here is the part nobody says out loud. You cannot eat your kitchen cabinets. If your net worth is $1,400,000 and $900,000 of that is a house in a neighborhood like Oakville or Burnaby, are you actually rich? Or are you sitting on an asset that pays your property tax bill and nothing else? The trade-off is easy to miss until you see it written down. Every dollar of net worth locked into your home is a dollar that is not generating a monthly paycheck for you in retirement. That house might climb in value over the next 20 years, but it will not send you a deposit on the first of the month. The long-term cost of ignoring that is simple. You keep looking wealthy on paper while your spendable income stays flat. Net worth is the number your bank statement is proud of. Spendable income is the number that actually pays your bills. To see how far apart those two can be, look at what I call the spendable yield ratio. Basically, how much real monthly income your liquid savings can generate once the house is out of the equation. Take that $873,000 net worth for a 55 to 64-year-old at the top of their age group. Subtract $400,000 for a paid off or nearly paid off house. That leaves $473,000 in actual liquid savings, the kind you can draw from. At a conservative 5% withdrawal rate, a number planners use to try to make savings last 25 to 30 years, that portfolio pays out under $2,000 a month. That withdrawal rate is not arbitrary. It is built to survive a bad run of markets in the first few years of retirement, the years that do the most damage to a portfolio's long-term health. You are in the top 10% of the country for your age group, and your investments are paying you less than someone working full-time at minimum wage. That is not a knock on you. It is what happens when most of a household's wealth sits in bricks and drywall instead of an account that can send you a deposit every month. I remember spending years looking at the net worth line first, the way most of us are taught to. Then I watched someone with $2 million on paper and a heavy mortgage look more stressed about money than a neighbor with $800,000, quietly sitting in a TFSA. The statement was hiding the number that actually mattered. Picture the actual bills: property tax, hydro, a car insurance renewal that always seems to climb a little more every year. None of those get paid with net worth. They get paid with the cash that lands in your account, and for a lot of people who look wealthy on paper, that cash is thinner than the statement lets on. This is not only a problem for one net worth tier. Run the same math on a top 5% household with $2,600,000 in net worth. If $1,100,000 of that sits in the house, the cottage, and the vehicles, the liquid pool drops to $1,500,000. At the same 5% rate, that pays out about $6,250 a month, which sounds a lot better, but it is still a long way from what $2,600,000 looks like it should generate. This is the liquidity gap the opening promised. Depending on how much of a household's wealth sits in the house versus the investment account, people can overestimate their real retirement budget by as much as 60%. The net worth number stays the same on the screen. The actual deposit that lands in the checking account every month tells a very different story. So if net worth is not the real scoreboard, what is? For a Canadian retiree, it starts with a number I think of as the floor, and it comes from two government programs most people underestimate. Strip away the house, the RRSP, and every other asset, and every Canadian retiree still has a floor underneath them, built from two government programs. The average CPP payment in 2026 runs about $925 a month. Old Age Security for the July to September quarter of 2026 pays $742.31 a month for someone between 65 and 74. Add those together for a couple, both drawing an average amount, and you land on a floor of roughly $40,000 a year before tax. The National Payroll Institute has been tracking what retirees actually need to spend to live comfortably, not lavishly, and their research points to about $55,000 a year for a household that wants to call itself comfortable rather than rich. That means the government floor alone leaves a gap of at least $15,000 a year just to reach comfortable, long before anyone gets near what most people picture when they hear the word rich. To actually live like the top 10%, most retired households need spendable income well past $100,000 a year, and that gap does not shrink just because you feel ready to stop working. That is the real distance between the floor CPP and OAS build for you and the lifestyle that comes with the net worth numbers we have been talking about. A gap that size does not feel abstract once you picture it as monthly bills. It is the difference between covering a mortgage payment and a car insurance renewal from the government floor alone versus having enough left over after the essentials to actually enjoy your time. In the 1990s, a retiree could park savings in a 5% GIC and let it quietly cover that gap, interest payments alone doing most of the work. That kind of guaranteed rate barely exists anymore. Closing the same gap today usually means taking on more investment risk, or drawing down savings more deliberately, just to replace the income a GIC used to hand you for free. That shift is not something most people notice happening. It shows up quietly, one renewal notice at a time, until the strategy that worked for their parents stops working for them. But here is where it gets complicated. If you try to close that gap by leaning hard on your RRSP, the same government that built your floor can quietly take a chunk of it back. Picture a couple who hit the top 5%, sitting on $2,600,000 in net worth, with $1,500,000 of that inside RRSPs. On paper, that is about as secure as retirement planning gets in Canada. It sounds like the kind of number that ends money worries for good. Then the calendar turns to age 72, and a rule most people never paid attention to at 45 starts making decisions for them. The government requires a minimum withdrawal from a RRIF every year, whether the money is needed or not. That forced withdrawal, stacked on top of CPP and OAS, can push a couple's income straight into the OAS recovery tax zone, which starts at $95,323 in 2026. Cross that line and 15 cents of every OAS dollar gets clawed back for every dollar of income above it. On a 5-figure clawback, that 15 cents can add up to enough to cover a full year of property tax. The couple who does nothing different just lets the forced withdrawal happen and watches part of their OAS disappear every single year for the rest of retirement, a quiet leak that never comes up at the dinner table. The couple who planned ahead starts moving RRSP money out earlier, often around age 60, shifting it into a TFSA using the $7,000 annual limit, deliberately keeping their taxable income under that $95,323 line before the RRIF rules force their hand. This is not a loophole, and it is not a trick. It is simply how a program built to help you save gets treated by the tax system the same way a paycheck is the moment withdrawals stop being optional. None of this makes the RRSP a bad idea. The deduction it gave along the way was real money in your pocket for decades. The trap only shows up for people who never plan the exit, the same way a well-built house still needs someone to eventually walk out the front door. Being rich in Canada is not really about what your RRSP statement says. It comes down to what the CRA lets you keep. There is a reason $873,000 does not feel like as much as it should. Nobody compares themselves to the median Canadian who earns somewhere around $44,000 a year. You compare yourself to the neighbor who just drove home in a $120,000 electric SUV, and next to that, even a solid net worth can feel small. Behavioral researchers call this the reference group effect, comparing yourself to the people directly around you instead of the country as a whole. And it works quietly in the background whether you notice it or not. An SUV in the driveway is a snapshot, not a balance sheet, but it is the snapshot your brain reacts to first. This reference point problem does not go away with more money either. People with $2 million compare themselves to people with $5 million. The same way, people with $200,000 compare themselves to a neighbor with $800,000. It is normal to feel anxious even sitting on $1 million. You spent close to 40 years in what amounts to accumulation mode, saving, contributing, watching the number climb. Switching into decumulation, actually spending it down on purpose, can feel like breaking a rule you have followed your whole adult life. Here is a smaller shift that helps more than most spreadsheets. Stop checking your net worth every month. Start tracking your safe monthly spendable instead, the amount you can actually withdraw and spend without shrinking your future. If that number comes out to $6,000 and you are only spending $4,000, you are rich. It does not matter what the top 1% are doing with their $7,900,000. Start with one calculation. Divide your liquid assets, the part of your net worth you could actually spend, by your total net worth. If that ratio comes out under 40%, you have what amounts to a lifestyle bottleneck, plenty of wealth on paper, not enough of it able to move. It is a 5-minute exercise, and it tells you more about your real retirement readiness than the net worth number ever will. Someone with $873,000 in net worth and $473,000 of it liquid is sitting at a ratio of about 54%, comfortably above that bottleneck line. Someone with the same $873,000, but only $200,000 liquid is under 25%, and that is the household that needs to act first. Next, look at the RRSP and TFSA pivot. If you are 55 or older, prioritize that $7,000 TFSA limit every year you can manage it. Money inside a TFSA gives you a tax-free cushion you can pull from without triggering the OAS clawback math from earlier, a buffer for the years when markets or expenses get unpredictable. Third, look hard at the home equity lever before you retire, not after. A HELOC or a downsizing plan is far easier to arrange while you still have employment income qualifying you for the best rate, rather than trying to set one up on a fixed retirement income. I have seen people sitting on $3 million in net worth who are genuinely stressed, because almost none of it can turn into cash without selling a house or triggering a tax bill. A big number on paper does not fix that by itself. The size of your net worth was never the finish line. How much of it you can actually spend, that is the real scoreboard. Being rich in Canada in 2026 was never really about hitting $2 million in net worth. It comes down to two things working together: a floor built from CPP and OAS that is not going anywhere, and enough of your own savings sitting somewhere liquid, enough to hand you $6,000 or more a month, after tax, whenever you need it. If you want to go deeper on how to draw down an RRSP without walking straight into the OAS clawback, that is exactly what the next video covers. You spent decades earning this money. It deserves just as much attention on the way out as it got on the way in.